Welcome to Ignite Intimacy, a podcast exploring intimacy, romantic relationships, sexuality, and everything that relates to these hot topics. We're going in. Are you ready? This is your host, Laura Aisha. Let's do this. Hello, Ignite Intimacy community. This is Miss Laura Aisha, and we are here for another juicy, powerful episode of the Ignite Intimacy podcast. One of my intentions last year was to have more men on the show. So I'm really excited that that trend is happening and super excited to have this man on the line with us today. Rakhem, where are you checking in from?
I live in Asheville, North Carolina.
Ah, nice. Okay, cool. So we've got Rakhem Seku. He and his wife have a company called Juju Mama, and we are going to be diving into all sorts of hot topics from gender harmonics to the female choice paradigm, tantra and sacred sexuality, and then choice around open relating and open relationships and what that looks like from someone who's been in a successful open relationship for many years. So Rakhem, what is going on?
Oh man, just enjoying the 2018 year and, really just being in alignment with everything that's happening in the world and in our community. So everything's feeling really good, and I'm glad you had me on.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much. Leslie Tavernier, who we just released her episode 2 weeks ago. So you'll listen to this probably sometime in April, but Leslie Tavernier, her episode aired in February, and it's something like episode 58 or 59. Definitely check that one out. It was a juicy conversation and just very powerful, very grounded, and some really great tips, especially for women, but for both women and men. So she was like, okay, you need to connect with Rakhem because he and his wife do some very powerful work in many different areas of sacred sexuality and the feminine versus the masculine and open relating. And these are all topics that I'm really curious about. And we've certainly touched in on during the last year and a half that Ignite Intimacy has been alive. And so just really excited to talk more about these topics from a male perspective. So,
nice.
And so Rakhem, tell us just a little bit about your origin story. Who were you as a sexual being as you were coming up in life, and what sort of spearheaded you getting involved in this work?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think my upbringing and my exposure to sexuality and that kind of stuff is pretty standard for, a lot of young boys in our culture. And that is, I got to, age 15 or 16, started feeling immense pressure to lose my virginity and be somebody who's looked at as attractive by girls. So that was like a major point of tension for me and a lot of my friends. Like it was a really big deal for us. And so kind of the beginning of that journey led me into, really making a lot of clumsy missteps and, exploring relationships with women in ways that brought in a biased view of what sexuality was, of what, women were looking for, et cetera. And so like that was the beginning of my journey, right? So it's basically almost under duress, a lot of peer pressure, a lot of social pressure. And then I kind of moved into, my young adult life where, I'm in college and, I'm trying to have as much sex as I possibly can for the experience and that type of thing. Mm-hmm. And again, it's just, a lot of assumptions, things that we learned from movies and pornography, et cetera. Those kind of drove who I was as a sexual being. And then I ended up getting married to my wife and, our sex life, it was okay. I graded probably about a C.
And how were you young when you got married?
Yeah, I was 24 when I got engaged and when I met Kenya, and then we got married when I was 25.
Okay.
So fairly young. My wife, when we got married, she was 21 at the time. So we were both, young couple. And so we started our journey with our sexuality. And when we got a little bit later into our marriage, probably around year 10, we started experimenting and learning about Tantra. So actually we had kind of been studying it before that, but we met a teacher who was very adept at many of the principles and very experienced. And that kind of opened things up sexually. So we went from basically a C sex life to probably about, B plus.
And at that, before you got into that work, was there some discontent or some curiosity about, okay, we've been together for a decade. I know for a lot of relationships, that decade time frame tends to be, do I want to stay in this relationship? Is this working for me? Or is it time to move on? Is the spark still here? Can we get it back? Were you experiencing any of that stuff? Or was it just sort of a natural thing that came across your table, for lack of a better word?
Yeah, for us, it was more natural. And that's because, Tantra for us was an extension of the things that we were into anyway. So we were into metaphysics and spirituality. And so that was just the topic that we loved. And when we came across the whole Tantra world, it fit right in with everything else that we had been studying up to that point.
Okay.
We weren't considering separation or divorce. We were very tight as a family.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, the one thing that my wife and I agreed to do when we got married, that was a part of the vows that we wrote ourselves, was we agreed that we would not get a divorce. So we agreed that, we were going to work through our issues, that we were going to, find out where the disconnects were in our relationship, and do the work required to maintain the family. Mm-hmm. So that was a commitment that we made to each other.
That's awesome. Well, and you have a couple of degrees so you've got a degree in engineering and a degree in finance. Were you involved in a career in engineering or finance or both prior to the businesses that you started to create with Kenya?
Well, I had a couple of internships in the finance world working for Xerox Corporation.
Okay. But
my primary work was in consulting. So basically doing software consulting, software design for Verizon.
Okay.
So I worked for 10 years for a large consulting company called Accenture, and my main client was Verizon. And so I was just very technical, very high-paced environment, a lot of, type A type personalities. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I was in a very intense but fulfilling corporate environment before we actually went into business together.
Okay, great. So you got into this Tantra work together, and that, it sounds like that opened up something for you guys in your intimate, more sexual relationship.
Yeah. And the reason why is because part of our Tantra studies included understanding the masculine and the feminine.
Okay.
And understanding, what do women desire and how do they desire it? Mm-hmm. And, one of the things my Tantra teacher would say is that, a woman should be able to have sex with whoever she wants, wherever she wants, whenever she wants, and that's because of her nature, right? So what's going to happen is when she's going to have these desires, they're going to come up at, times that might not be, predictable or convenient, but they're important. When she has that desire, when she has that feeling, it's very important. It's important to honor that. Mm-hmm. And so, that was the beginning of, okay, let me try to understand the feminine a lot more, right? And then that helped me to understand my wife and helped her to understand herself and the fact that she had these desires and needs. Like there's nothing wrong with her. It's just a part of, being a woman, being within your feminine nature.
Well, and I'm just curious that just in you sharing that, I mean, that's a profound statement, right? And from my experience, that's a statement that a lot of people would run very quickly the other way from. Because there's so much attachment and jealousy and control and no, you're mine. And, there's this whole no, that's mine. You're mine. And I don't want to share that. So as a man, what was it like for you to actually receive that information?
Well, it was the reason why I was able to receive it is because of the respect and what I had seen from, the people who were delivering that message and my particular Tantra teacher. So because I had respect for him and there were some other teachers I was also, looking at and, actually had experiences with them where I was able to see the power firsthand of what they were talking about, right? So it wasn't just lecture stuff or intellectual stuff or books. It was like, okay, they're demonstrating the power of what they're talking about. And so that's a big thing for me. Like, can people actually do what they're saying that they can do? And if they can do it, how profound and is it, et cetera? Yeah. So because I had a level of respect for him in that way, I was open to it, because I was in a completely different place as a man, around sexuality, around women. I was the kind of guy who, I wanted multiple wives, I felt that was normal, you know what I'm saying? So, and I felt it was normal for a woman to really not have a high sex drive, or, to want to be with just one man and et cetera.
Interesting.
So again, I just had this standard view of, which if you've ever read the book, Sex at Dawn,
oh yeah,
Christopher Ryan calls it the standard narrative of relationships, which is basically patriarchal, which is basically, masculine dominant. And so I was in that paradigm with everybody else.
Yeah. Well, we're fans of Christopher Ryan. Love you, Christopher Ryan. Dr. Chris. Great book. If you haven't read it, check it out. Sex at Dawn. It is so informative. It will totally blow your mind. And we were actually we recorded a conversation with Ian and Jaya came up with the erotic blueprint. So we were talking with them about these misconceptions about women and men, and women's sexuality and men's sexuality. So I'm really glad that you're pointing to this right now.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's, like you said, that book it's an amazing book. For us, it came at just the right time, because, we were in the middle of our journey. Or actually, we kind of just completed our journey, and, we're talking about sexuality. And we really needed something that was, well researched, well written, to kind of support what we were saying. And so when him and his wife released their book, it was right on time, and it's still a great reference. And like you said, I really recommend that people take a look at it.
Absolutely, yeah. It will challenge everything that we've ever been taught about women's and men's sexuality and monogamy. And one of the reasons why I started this podcast is that I've always been curious. Am I meant for one man? Am I meant for multiple men? And I felt very conflicted around that. Like, is that okay that I feel that way? And, because sometimes I think that I feel more like men around sexuality and just the variety. And I think, gosh, like, why would I ever want to limit myself? Because there are so many amazing human beings in the world, right? So
exactly.
And then on the flip side, feeling bad and wrong and shameful about that part of myself that is a not only a world adventure and a human adventure and a creative adventure, but also a sexual adventure and explorer, and feeling bad about that, like it's wrong that I feel that way. And then making myself bad and wrong that, like, what, one relationship isn't enough for me?
Right. Yeah. And it's, there are a lot of different factors at play, so like I was saying, our culture is just geared towards, patriarchal, kind of almost like a toxic masculinity dominant perspective. But then you have things like religion, right? So religion, which is also comes from the same source, primarily patriarchal and not very friendly to the feminine. I mean, that, that's going to weigh in heavily on people individually and the culture. And even people who don't subscribe to religion, what people need to realize and understand is that, well, we're still a part of the culture of religion. So even the concept of right and wrong, what I'm saying, and the concept of judgment, I mean, those things are born out of religious culture, right? So we're again, in modern culture and Western culture, we're still struggling with those basic elements that create the foundation of our culture. And just be able to recognize what those elements are, let alone grow into a place where, what I feel I want for myself is okay. It's not even about indulging in it or about pursuing it. It's about the fact that I feel this way is okay.
That's right.
And coming to a place of peace, around that feeling. And then knowing and understand you have not only the choice to determine which direction you move, but also the power to implement it in your life and the freedom to do so.
Exactly.
And so it's a journey.
Exactly. Well, and then also just, I feel that there's there's fear in me even sharing this because I'm like, oh no, what if someone I'm interested in listens to this and they're going to be like, oh no, not for me. And I'm not even sure if I actually do believe that one man could be enough for me. I just haven't, I've experienced elements of that, not the full thing yet. And then also I'm open to, having a couple of different boyfriends and or having a primary partner and then, something beyond that. But I'm still just exploring like what will work for me as an individual human being. Like take away all the stories and all the guesses and, assumptions. But like for me as a human being, what really works best for me and the people that I choose to relate with.
Exactly. That's exactly right. And, that's why, so it was basically our Tantra studies and, exploring what the feminine is, which kind of led us to open relating, which is even different than polyamory. But it's about choice. I mean, there's no need for you to put yourself into a box, right? Because you're discovering who you are. And even when you discover who you are, you're still going to change. Like that's a constant in the universe, right? So we're saying, hey, instead of putting yourself in a box by saying, oh, I'm only going to relate with one person, or I'm going to relate with these 2 or 3 people, and that's going to be it. Like, no, let's just be open to how you feel and what's presenting itself to you. And within that, what you can do is you can decide, okay, what level of authenticity and integrity am I going to operate in? Am I going to communicate these things to my partners, and how am I going to do that? And am I going to move in a way that represents, the person I want to be? Which could be somebody of, like I said, high integrity and just authenticity. So, that's to me, that's what open relating is really about. It's not about a structure per se, because I always tell people you can be celibate your entire life, but really consider yourself open. And the reason why is because, that's what you feel is the best thing for you. And you felt that, even 50 years later, that this was still the best thing for me. So that makes you open because you allow yourself to have the power to make a choice on which direction you want to go. Same thing with having one partner. You could have one partner your entire life and you say, this is what's best for me, or based on what's going on in my life, I would only like to be committed to one partner. And that's, you're still open as long as you don't cage yourself into, well, it's got to be this way. And the problem is, as soon as you say that, and this is kind of the way reality works, as soon as you say, well, I'm only going to be with one person, well, that's when certain things present themselves to challenge that reality. And everything that challenges you comes from where? It comes from within you.
Yeah.
So it's always a slippery slope.
Yeah, well, it is. And I just want to, highlight what you said. It's just about being able to express that to yourself, in the world, to your partner, and being okay with that, whether you act on it or not. And
exactly.
And then beyond that, something that else is coming up for me is when I was younger, I used to think that dynamic connections meant sexual. Like, there was this, I don't know if it was a misalignment or a collapsing of things, but I would feel I'm actually in my human design, I am like, I read people, I connect with people very quickly, almost instantly. I can connect with someone, and not everyone, but a lot of people. And I feel people really deeply, like I feel life. And so I've had this experience where I've been confused about, like, when I was younger, this confusion around, wait, am I supposed to be sexual with this person? Or do I just want to love on this person? Or do I just want to sit and talk with this person for 3 hours? And that's the intimate connection that we have. And so what I've realized through the years is that now I have all sorts of different types of connections with people I feel a strong, connection with, because I'm not limiting myself. And by not limiting myself, I've actually given myself the space to decipher, oh, this feels more sexual. This feels more just like I could sit and talk to this person for hours and it's very intimate because we can connect on a level, but there's no sexual anything there, or this person is just a friend, or this person I just like enjoy going out with and having fun with, so there's just like this variety now, as opposed to just like friends or sex.
Yeah, my thing is, and what I talk about in my book, The Art of Open Relating, is that, I feel that sex should always be on the table, right? And the reason why I say that is because it's the only way to take sex off the table in a comfortable way. Meaning, if instead of like everybody kind of sitting and having these thoughts in the back of their mind about, is this sexual, or does that person want me? Do I want them? Like trying to figure that out. Just understand that human beings, like we're sexual by nature. That's how we've survived, right? Without our sexuality, we don't exist right now because, it really wasn't our intelligence or anything else that allowed us to survive. It was the fact that we were able to come together and bond on a very deep level and care for everyone within the family and community in a very deep way. And sexuality was the gateway for us to do that. Mm-hmm. And so, sexuality should just be on the table. Like we're sexual beings. That's a part of who we are as human beings. And so let's acknowledge that, hey, not only am I sexual, not only are you sexual, but hey, we might have a little bit of sexual energy on a scale of 1 to 10. Maybe it's only a 3, but let's just acknowledge it. And now we can go ahead and just be about, connecting and not have any tension around anything that we're doing or saying to each other. You see what I'm saying?
I totally see what you're saying. And I love that you said that because I'm having more of those conversations with people and just being bold enough to come out and say, okay, hang on a second. I'm feeling like some flirty energy here. And, are you feeling me sexually, or are you interested in more than just friendship with me? And just being more bold and putting it out there. And I've actually gotten some really great reactions from people like, oh, wow, actually, I am feeling you, or actually, no, you're not quite my type. So then I'm like, oh, well, maybe that's just me feeling it, and I love that. I love the putting it out there so that you can actually just deal with what's there instead of playing this guessing game.
Exactly. Because it's always there, right? It's always there.
It is.
So, and again, a part of, being free as human beings is just acknowledging, the fact that we are sexual beings, that we do enjoy it. We love connection with other human beings. Like it's what really, it's the fire that really ignites the soul.
Yes. I mean, it's
it takes
why
us
we're
into
all
our
here.
deepest spirituality. Yes, exactly. That's how we got here.
So, okay. That's really, really powerful. So with regards to the choice paradigm, let's talk about that a bit.
Okay.
So when we originally spoke, so normally when I have a guest on the show for my audience, we have a conversation before we actually do the recording, schedule the recording. And it's just for us to like touch in and say, okay, like what topics are really hot for you right now? And what could we chat about? And so Rakhem brought up this topic about the choice paradigm, and something that I've butted up against consistently through my entire, dating life and more adult life is I'm a pursuer, and I've been shamed for that. I've been told by many people that I need to let men pursue me. And if I'm reaching out to men, then they're not going to be interested in me because they need the chase and they need all of that. So we've definitely talked about this a bit on the podcast. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, Rakhem. And then I'd also like to dive into the choice paradigm where women are sort of like waiting to be chosen by men. But what if you flip that and women become the ones that are choosing?
Exactly. Yeah. And the full name is called the female choice paradigm. My wife created it. She created it based on our gender harmonics model, right?
Cool. Hi, Kenya. We're going to have her on the show as well.
Oh, yeah. No, she's amazing. And so the concept, it kind of goes back to what I was saying in terms of, women having this ability and the freedom to express their sexuality, right? Well, and expressing your sexuality means also expressing your attraction, right? And so what we're saying is that, that when a woman feels a level of attraction for a man or woman or whoever, that there's some intelligence behind that. There's a reason for that, right? And the reason behind that should not be looked at as fleeting or something that's superficial. It should be looked at as something that matters on a number of levels, right? One example is, maybe she's sensing that you need a level of healing as a man, right? Because as we know, women are the primary nurturers and healers in the community. And sexuality or levels of intimacy, et cetera, even just touch is something that, is able to bring that healing. Or maybe she senses that, the connection between you and her is going to create, an amazing new human being. You know what I'm saying? Like that's her inner intuitive nature that's like really communicating that to her. Or maybe there's something that's telling her that, you all are going to be able to really, help each other go to the next level. And the way you're going to do that is through, your sexual connection and through, the different ways that you relate, et cetera. So the bottom line is what I'm saying is there's a reason why women have the attractions they have. It's not just, oh, she's horny, right? And so, let's get her some.
Thank
right?
you.
No, there's a deeper meaning behind that. And so the flip side of that is, well, if she's getting this, if her radar's going off saying, oh, there's a connection here that needs to be explored, then the men should honor that. We should honor that intelligence, right? And say, okay, well, this is not, again, superficial. Let's look into this. And again, it's not that men say, oh, yeah, whatever you want, like, let's do it. But, we need to acknowledge that women have these attractions. And so the foundation of the choice paradigm is saying that, A, women have these attractions and they can kind of feel from an intuitive perspective, who should be for them and in what way, et cetera. B, that not only, and I guess we'll talk about this when we go deeper into the paradigm itself, but there's these various reasons why women choose men or partners. I don't want to put it just on men, but there's various reasons. And those things are very important, not only to her psyche and keeping her balanced. So again, it's not just about trying to find a husband. It's also trying to find, that warrior, that protector. It's also trying to find, that guru, that person is going to bring out the deepest spirituality and divinity within her, et cetera. So when she sees these different aspects in men, she's helping the man also tap into his higher aspects as well. And so there's just so much that's taking place within the choice paradigm. Right now, the way it is the opposite, right? And we have a situation where basically monogamy is the governing structure, relationship structure in the world. It's an ownership and capitalism-based structure, right? So basically monogamy is designed to ensure paternity, like, Christopher Ryan said in his book. And so what happens is, women are forced to be a certain way and choose and function a way in order to fit into that particular model. And in doing so, they have to turn off their true desire, what they really feel, right? The problem is that causes illness, that causes situations where, people really are not even, in love with each other or attracted to each other, et cetera. And so now we've created a relationship model where the foundation of the relationship is built on inauthenticity, right? It's built on a lie. I always say monogamy is built on a lie, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so we have it completely backwards. If you talk to men, especially men who are elders, we all know that women are the choosers, right? But we just don't practice it. Like we have a hard time practicing it. One of the elders in my group says, yeah, women, what do you say? Women, they allow you to, you probably have heard of the thing, but they kind of allow you to, they kind of feign that they're being chased, but they really only allow you to chase because they've already chosen you, that kind of deal. And I've always heard it throughout my life, women are the choosers, women are the choosers. But in terms of actual practice, it's always been the men who've taken that mantle. And the bottom line, Laura, when you look at relationships, you look at the relationship dynamic, most relationships in our society are failures, primarily because men are doing the choosing. Because what a woman really feels and who she's really chosen to be with has not been honored. And she's, in most cases, had to settle for someone who she knows, does not have what she needs or desires, and it's never going to last and never works. Which is why in a day of empowerment like we're in today, that's why up to 70% of divorces are initiated by women. Because you're just, as women get more empowered, like, I'm just not going to deal with any BS. Like, it's just not. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Laura.
Yeah. I was just going to say that's why I'm still single, because I'm not willing to settle.
Exactly. Yeah. Why settle? Why, in this day of empowerment, in this day where, more and more choices are being revealed, to us as spiritual beings, why settle? Because all that's going to happen is things are going to not turn out well. There's going to be fights, arguments, going to be disconnects. It's going to dampen your spiritual power, right? It's going to dampen your happiness. It's going to affect your children. It's going to affect your community. And so why go down that path? On the flip side, Laura, when women choose, there's a magic in that. And the magic is the real thing that men are looking for is to be desired, is to have a woman who's passionately into them. And I know we have a kind of reverse in our society. We think that's what women are looking for, but no, what makes a man feel really good is when a woman is passionately into him, desires him sexually, etc. And when you have this choice paradigm at work, what you'll find is that men will be chosen by multiple women. And so there's always going to be a level of happiness and content within the masculine community, which means there's going to be, a level of protection for all women, a level of honoring of the feminine, as well as, honoring of all children in the community. And so that's actually the glue that actually holds communities together. And so that's why we say the choice paradigm is so important.
Oh, that's so powerful. Okay, cool. Choice paradigm. Lots of love and respect to Kenya, and I can't wait to dive into that with her more. We'll have to get something on the calendar with her. So then let's move into the whole piece around sexuality. And first of all, so many people in our country, let's just talk about the United States, who are suffering from lack of a thriving sex life or any sex life whatsoever. And this desire to have a thriving sex life.
Yeah, and you want to kind of dig deeper into that?
Yeah, just, in your work, and what have you discovered? What do you think are the root causes of this dis-ease within our relationships as far as, this, like not having or not choosing a thriving sexual life, or choosing a partner where, in your heart, you're not going to have a thriving sexual life?
Yeah. Well, again, it goes back to our culture, which includes religion. So again, whether we want to admit it or not, all of us on some level believe sex is a sin, right? So we're very secretive about how we talk about it, about how we approach it, about, where we're willing to do it. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're still more comfortable doing it with the lights off at night, which subconsciously symbolizes us doing things, kind of in shame, right? So we still believe that sex is a sin, again, because of monogamous and capitalistic culture, right? The combination of those two things, we've commoditized sex. So basically, what we've done is we've basically said that male sexuality is kind of is worthless, right? So a penis really has no value, while a female sexuality is of high value, right? And if you attach other things around that, then now we have a hierarchy system. Right. Now, when you create a hierarchy system, you're going to create what? Supply and demand situations as well as competition. Mm-hmm. And so what we have is we've turned sex into a capitalistic venture. And so now people are holding their sexuality captive to try to get the most they can possibly get from the situation, or they're leveraging their sexuality, or we have men paying for sexuality and trying to reach positions of power just so they can have their sexuality. And so we've been seeing coming out with the Weinsteins and all these things, these people being exposed. Like, these are really what I like to call beta males who are seeking power positions and money for the primary desire, which is to obtain sex. And so when you look at our sexual culture, it's completely and totally backwards, right? We've commoditized it, and it's just turned into something that's, instead of a healing, bonding mechanism, which brought us into being as humans, it's basically a resource. And so that's the foundation of it, right? And so you go into marriage or in a relationship. Well, again, I just told you that most women are not in relationships with the men they really chose to be with. They tend to settle. Well, as a woman, and this is why women have to be the choosers, because if your heart is not into the man you're with, or if you're not connected to him emotionally, you cannot have a fulfilling sex life. You see what I'm saying? Like, you cannot connect with a man sexually unless you really have a strong emotional connection. Yeah. And the stronger the connection, the longer, you'll be able to sustain it. And so I would say that most women don't have very strong emotional connections to the men they're with. They understand intellectually why it's important to be married and what to do as a wife and the responsibilities and that kind of stuff. But do they have that strong emotional connection? The answer is no. And so when you look at all those things, Laura, I mean, sex is going to suffer, which is why we have a sexless marriage epidemic in this country, right? On top of all of that, there's no education around sex, or very little. Sex is something that, although we do it naturally, we should have 2 or 3 semesters of it in high school, just to explore it and talk about it, and just to experiment with it. We should have labs that people can communication. Exactly. We need to understand okay, what's the female sexual cycle, and how does she respond sexually differently during ovulation versus, what I'm saying? Like, all these things are factors that we just don't talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And so
it's
we
a
just
big
have
guessing game.
Oh yeah.
It's like, oh, you're good at it. Oh, you're not. Oh, and none of us ever got any education on it except for porn.
Exactly. And then at the same time, like you said, porn, you look at porn, and it looks like it's the same every single time, right? So it's just like, you just see these people like, having this aggressive friction-based sexual style, and you're watching video after video, and it's the same thing. So you're saying, oh, there's no fluctuation, right, in people's sexuality, number one. And then number two, sex is a major desire that we have as human beings. So not only do I not know about sex, but I have to have it, right? Especially when we hit puberty, like, it becomes very important that we obtain it. Mm-hmm. And so because I haven't been taught to deal with women, and women haven't been taught to deal with men, now we're actually in the place where I have to do something out of integrity in order to get it. I'm not just talking about things like rape and molestation. I'm saying, like, if you look at high school relationships and college relationships, like, men telling women they love them and they really don't, but they're doing whatever they got to do just to get sex. Yeah. Or saying, I'm going to be in a relationship with you so I have access to your sex because I need this experience. I need to learn, I need to understand, I need to release. Right?
Connect, right? Like, I think as a society, we're generally deprived of even just physical touch, non-sexual physical touch.
No, exactly. And then so Laura, that goes even deeper to when we're babies, right? When we're babies and infants, are we being touched enough? And the answer is usually no. Because you usually need to be touched by a variety of different adults throughout your infant life, for the first 13 plus years of your life, right? Mm-hmm. Like, every day you need that kind of touch.
Yeah.
So you grow up and you're missing it, and now you need it. You're almost like you're dehydrated or dying of thirst.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And so now you're looking for it. And again, when you're think about sex, it's the strongest, it's the strongest creative force in the universe. And I have no outlet for it. What do you think that human beings are going to do to try to get that or satisfy it? They're going to go to great lengths.
Yeah. Well, and it was interesting because, speaking of Chris, I was having a conversation with him this winter about these mass shootings, and and it is a fact that in the United States, that white males are the perpetrators of these huge acts of mass shootings. Right? Mm-hmm. It's not black males. It's not Asian males. It's not Latin males. It is white American men who are perpetrating this violence. And something that Chris was mentioning is that in several of their suicide letters or whatever, or there is proof in their life that they were deprived of sex, deprived by women. Women weren't into them, women were ignoring them, women were pushing them away and not giving them any affection or sex or intimacy. And he was suggesting that this is a huge part of why we have this type of violence here in America.
Oh, yeah. I totally agree with him. But it's even deeper than that, Laura. I mean, I want people to try to wrap their brains around what I'm going to say, because it's become a part of our culture. We don't really recognize how big of a deal this is. But when you look at male violence, right, and you look at male sexual dysfunction and the way men function towards women, which in many cases can be very, harmful to a woman's psyche. Where does it all start? It starts with male genital mutilation, or what we call circumcision, right? So there's this idea that, the woman's clitoris is more sensitive than a man's penis, and that's just not true. A woman's clitoris is more sensitive than a circumcised penis, but it's not more sensitive than an uncircumcised penis. And the reason why that's important is because what you're doing is, for many boys, infants, right, you're exposing them to a deep sexual trauma immediately after birth. And so the question is, how does that play on a a boy's and then man's psyche on a subconscious level as he's relating with women. And a clue of that is, I'll tell you, is that most men, especially those who have been circumcised, have a level of anger towards their mother, which gets transferred and translated onto other women. Even when men try to show up in a certain way, for women, and they understand intellectually that, yeah, we should be kind and, we should be gentle and all these things, that if that pain has not been healed within that man from his circumcision, and then just knowing on the subconscious level that, hey, my mom had something to do with this, like, because she's my protector. Like, everyone knows that she's your protector from age 0 to 2 primarily. And then dad kind of comes in and, starts to take over the years. But no, a lot of young boys feel violated in that way, and they don't understand it. They're not aware of it because it happened, at age 7 days or whatever it is. And so we have to fix these things. This is a part of our culture. But I just don't think we're going to see major changes in our sexual culture and in our relationship culture until we stop, male genital mutilation in this country.
That is so powerful. So I had a daughter, and I have several friends who've had sons who've done a lot of research around this and have chosen not to have their sons circumcised. And you're just helping me remember why there's a movement to end circumcision of infant children. Yeah.
And people should watch the videos. They should watch the videos of the circumcision so they can see just kind of how brutal it is.
Yeah. Well, and so tying this into the Me Too movement, what has been your experience of the Me Too movement?
Well, my wife and I talked about this at length, and we just feel, the Me Too movement is a great movement, primarily because it's a recognition that there are imbalances in society, especially around sexuality and et cetera. However, we just see it, a lot of the messaging as just, it's part of the culture we live in, right? And so what we need to understand is that, look, yes, there are many men, and there are many men who sexuality in women, but they also have violated women through sexual assault, et cetera, right? But we need to understand that this is bigger than men making choices. And I think that's where some of this stuff gets lost. It's a cultural dynamic that, for example, one of the, I talk about molestation and rape a lot within my group. And I said, we live in a culture where we just can't we don't really have trust for anyone, And so we talk about, okay, so I'm trying to say to people like, talk to your husband, talk to your wife, have open communication, right? But it's so hard to do that because the culture is really not built that way. So, for example, when you look at why is rape even prevalent, besides the fact that these behaviors are being perpetrated in our society, one of the big things is that, people, not just children, but people feel they have no one that they can really trust and talk to.
Yeah.
So if I'm supposed to have a connection with my father, well, not just communication, that's true, but also like I should have a relationship with my father and mother where I know that I can bring anything to them. The fact that we live in a culture where any child, 13 or young adult, 18, feels they can't talk to their parents or have not just one or two, but a number of confidants, you know what I'm saying, that they can go to and talk about any subject. That is a travesty in of itself. It's a closed society. So whenever there's a closed society, meaning a secret society, that's the fertile ground to allow these things to persist. Once we open the society up, where people don't have shame about things that are just so natural to the human experience, then we just eliminate sexual assault entirely.
Yeah.
But no, it's always going to be there, no matter how much education, et cetera, we do. It's always going to be there until we feel a deeper connection with each other as human beings. Because as soon as we get a generation who's like, well, whatever happens to me, I'm telling. You know what I'm saying? It's over.
Yeah.
It's over in that instant.
Well, the other thing that is really that I'm getting through this conversation is the emphasis on women and not on men in the Me Too movement.
Well, from our perspective, it's both and. So women and men have an equal responsibility and burden in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
The first burden for women and men is to, wait, let's stop and check ourselves.
Yeah.
What's my perception of myself, and what's my perception of the opposite sex? That's where it starts, number one.
Mm-hmm.
Number two is, now let me go into a situation where I am out of my ego and I'm not closed to listening to what the opposite sex, and actually the same sex, because a lot of men don't listen to men and vice versa, have to say about their experience. And try to get into a thing we talk about, which is try to tap into empathy. Mm-hmm. Right. And so once we're able to do those two things, I think we can do it. But I express it that way because I just want everyone to understand, from my perspective, that it's a cultural dynamic, and B, we all have equal work to do in it. I think when you look at men, and again, it's easier for me to speak as a man looking kind of outside myself from what I observe. Yeah, I mean, like I said, my masculinity was toxic before I started exploring Tantra. Mm-hmm. I wanted multiple wives, and why I want that was out of ignorance. I learned about sex through porn and movies, and I really was insensitive to what a woman felt and what a woman wanted. Mm. And so, I had to go through a process where I forgave myself for that. Yeah. And look at my history and look at my past relationships. And so I think as men, we need to do that. And I wrote a book called Finding Male Sexuality, which kind of talks about how I kind of came into a higher consciousness around my sexuality. But no, it's definitely, I'm really glad women are speaking out, because again, that pushes against this culture of secrecy, and that we see things being exposed and coming to the surface. But like Dave Chappelle said, if we don't make a deeper change culturally, then everybody's going to just, they're going to go below the surface again and go into hiding. Mm-hmm. And the problem's going to perpetuate itself for the next 100 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been such a rich conversation. I'm so grateful that you could join us today. So you are a published author. You have several books out. Where can people find you online?
If you go to our site, jujumama.com, that's JUJUMAMA.com.
Okay.
You'll find information from me and my wife, Kenya, as well.
Great. Okay. So jujumama.com. And then what we'll do, I'll chat with you offline, see if we can get a link specific to your books online where people can purchase those. And we'll have some links in the show notes as well that our listeners can reference. And Rakhem, I'm just so grateful for your time, your energy, for the way that you're showing up, for the path that led you to your wife and to Tantra and to the work that you're doing now in the world. It has been a real pleasure to sit and jam with you today.
Thank you so much for having me, Laura. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Anytime. And Ignite Intimacy community, you heard it first. Check out the work that Rakhem and his wife Kenya are doing at jujumama.com. And again, we'll have links in the show notes, so definitely check those out. And yeah, we're so grateful for you. If you have any questions or comments about this episode, or you want to connect with Juju Mama and the work that Rakhem and his wife are doing, please email us at hello@igniteintimacy.com. And we are so grateful for you. Check us out on iTunes, leave us a rating and a review, and keep tuning in and sharing with your friends. Until the next one, stay blessed, and ciao for now. Thanks for tuning in to another conversation on the Ignite Intimacy podcast hotline. We love that you choose to spend your time with us. Check us out at igniteintimacy.com. Subscribe to us on iTunes and leave us a review and a rating. It helps more people know about us. We love to hear from you. You can email us with questions, comments, or suggestions to hello@igniteintimacy.com. And tell your friends. Music was arranged by Jason Pfaff and Mike Corey. And this podcast is produced by yours truly, Laura Aisha. Thanks again, and we'll see you on the next one. In the meantime, let your light shine bright and ignite your intimacy.